Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are being tested on a physical, mental, and emotional level on an everyday basis. In this section, we will learn the impact that our external environment, internal environment, and our karma have on our prana and thus our DNA. We will also look at the functioning of the gut and the role that it plays in our immune system. Please take your time to understand the nitty-gritties of the Anujeevi Nirodhaka Pranayama that will be taught in this section. Kindly note that this pranayama must be done on an empty stomach only. We would earnestly request you to make this practice a routine. Practicing this pranayama on a regular basis would strengthen your immune system immensely. So let's get started.
Let's understand resilience and vulnerability. When there is a pandemic, especially like the corona, a virus that human had never encountered before, it fundamentally comes down to one's own resilience and vulnerability. This resilience or vulnerability basically relies upon the informations or you can say blueprints that are available in your cells, in your DNA. DNA is the library of the body for the body to refer to. If the body has to respond in a particular way, it just relies on the information that is already available in the DNA. And DNA is directly connected to the environment. It is not only in the genes, it has a lot to do with the environment you expose yourself to on a continuous basis. Because the fundamental information in the DNA is how the body reacts, right? And this reaction cannot be independent of the external influences. So DNA can be definitely influenced from the environment. And interestingly, you must note that thoughts are also an external entity to you. It comes from the environment that is outside of you. You can internalize it or allow it to pass through, that is your choice, but fundamentally the thought is an external entity. It is important to be conscious and aware with our interactions with the environment because we are also deciding the nature of prana that is flowing into our body. The beauty of prana is this: it has the capacity to absorb the characteristics of the previous source and it renders it into a destination entity. You eat a certain kind of food, the prana in the food also transfers the characteristics of its origin to what it is being delivered into. That's why they say you are what you eat, and as far as the body is concerned, this is absolutely true. Your body will indeed start having the resilience and vulnerability that is associated with the origin of the food. I do not want to turn this into a moral science class where I tell you what to eat and what not to eat, but I have to stress on the importance of all the interactions you have with prana because we are talking about pranayama here. It is not that you do whatever you want for the rest of the day and suddenly for half an hour you do some breathing exercises and expect your life to change. No, it's not going to happen like that. Because prana is all pervasive and all inclusive. It is flowing across from one form to the other, and each of your actions will have an influence on the prana and thus the pranayama also. So, I wouldn't tell you what to eat, but definitely I would ask you to watch what you're eating. Be aware of its nature. Be aware of its origin. Where is it coming from? Is it natural or synthetic? How is it produced? How much of it is manufactured in which factories? Where do they come from? Everything is important. Now, some ex-company will hire one model. She has earned her money, I'm happy for her. But there is no compulsion for you to eat or consume what she is endorsing. You have to do a little research on your own to see what is what. Apart from the food, even your other interactions, your clothing, your other consumables, your phones, the radiation it causes, how to minimize it, if not to eliminate it. You can turn them off or keep them in a separate room while you're sleeping. You can avoid frequently going close to towers if it's possible. You can restrict the usage to a specific time. All this will be taken care if you become a little aware. That's why I said I cannot go into the details of what you should be doing or what you shouldn't, because I have no interest to be a church, to be giving you dogmas. I am just asking you to become a little aware and see what is happening, what you're eating and what you're consuming, how they function. Is it harmful? How inevitable is it? How much can you avoid? That's it. It's not about food and beverages and radiations. Even the kind of relationships that one has around, it has a significant influence on us. Like we said earlier, prana is constantly flowing into and through different forms, and it does take the characteristic of what it is being consumed into. When you live with a certain kind of people who are toxic, who are not loving, and that results in you not being loved and cared enough, your body naturally begins to behave differently. Let's come to your internal environment now. While I said the thoughts are external, once you have internalized them, now what do I mean by internalizing? By accepting the thoughts? Yes, but also by rejecting the thoughts. Whether you accept it or you want to reject it, you have already internalized the thought. This is very important to note. Please note this. This means that the thought which you have internalized, either through accepting or through fighting, will start to have an influence on you that would have karmic repercussions. We will talk how not to internalize a thought or how to internalize a thought depending on the utility in some other talk. But here we are trying to understand the extent they can influence your body metabolisms. So once you internalize the thoughts, what happens? It immediately starts to affect your immune system, your hormones, your neuron transmitters. So immune system, of course it is good for us, it's needed. But what happens if it becomes overprotective? It is as dangerous as the one who doesn't have the immune system strong, right? This is obvious once you have constantly exposed yourself to a stressful environment or a toxic environment that is always putting your body in a flight or fight mode. Your body naturally adapts itself to constant threat, and then several autoimmune disorders begin in you. Then comes your hormones. The source of the food you take significantly affects the hormones. The milk that you drink, the source of the milk, and the hormones that were injected in the cow that produced the milk, and the cow itself that you consume after draining its milk its whole life. I'm not saying don't drink milk, don't eat cows. Please eat whatever you want. You can even eat bats also, but just be aware of the repercussions and consequences. Some consequences are limited to your body, some will affect the whole planet, but it's okay. You can continue doing whatever you want, but just be a little aware of the reality. The relationships that we spoke of before, once you're not in a loving environment, your mind begins to translate the lack of prana as hunger, and you might begin to eat more than necessary. When you lack prana in one form, the mind cannot interpret the lack properly, and it begins to make you a sort of a pervert by making you compensate for the prana through some other form. And that will of course have its negative consequences. Because the body was not really hungry, and you are continuing to stuff it with more and more food. Now what should happen? And then your immune system becomes hyperactive because your environment itself becomes a threat when it is not loving. Your body is constantly living in a fear or threat, and it starts tuning the hormones and immune system accordingly. And the neurotransmitters are also affected when your hormones and immune system is not in place. The communication of one chemical from one neuron to the other doesn't happen effectively because the whole body will be in the minimal mode. In a toxic environment such as the ones that the present day human beings live, the body is just functioning in a survival mode. It is just working in a way to keep you kind of alive so that you can execute the minimal actions that you are about to perform. Then there is karma that will influence our DNA. For now, let us understand that the blueprint that will decide the nature of the DNA is also largely byproduct of one's karma. It's all a cycle, you know. It's not like these three are exclusive. There is environment at one point of the circle, there is your inner world, and then there is karma, which is the way you bridge the external world and your internal world. All are interrelated, and only when you become more and more aware, you can actually be free of the cycle. Pranayama helps you disengage with the cycle of karma to be able to take a plunge into a new dimension. It is like a tangent drawn to a circle. It helps you take on a completely new path. It refreshes your body, it cleanses it at various levels. So, why we spoke about all this? It is important for one to understand that pranayama is not an exclusive practice. And it is not only about breath or breathing. It has to do with everything else around with which we have any sort of engagement. Because prana is being given and taken from the form every single moment. And unless we exercise at least a minimum level of awareness on all these things, the actual practice of pranayama or the techniques that we are about to discuss will have less or no effect at all on any individuals.